The most dangerous person in politics isn't the socialist. It's the politician that convinces you somebody else is going to pay. Which brings me to Mamdani, the mayor of New York. And here's the part Republicans aren't going to like. He may be the most honest politician in this story. He told New Yorkers exactly what he was going to do. Freeze the rent, free buses, raise taxes. He said it all day long during the election cycle, and they voted for it. And guess what? He started doing it. Nobody got conned. And that is what should really scare you, because the argument was never about whether he told the truth. It was about whether the arithmetic works. New York's free buses cost about $652 million a year. The rent freeze covers 44% of the city's apartments, and the people receiving the benefit know exactly what they got. And the people paying for it usually found out much later by mail. So that's the political business model I am talking about. Give one person the benefit now, and somebody else gets the invoice later. And never, never, under any circumstances, put both of them in the same room, because that's how a budget meeting breaks out. But here is the twist. This is not really a story about socialism, because Republicans are doing it too. They just use a different word, borrowing. So today, I'm going to show you who is actually paying, why the bond market may already be noticing, and exactly what I bought with my own money because of it. So, welcome to Capital Mischief. I read the filings, I follow the money, and I talk to the people who generally prefer not to be quoted. And then I tell you what I own. So subscribe. It's free, all of it. So yes, I hear that too, but I'm going to tell you the real facts, okay? So let's go back to the mayor. Mamdani told New York what he wanted: free buses, rent freezes, universal child care, obviously higher taxes to pay for it all. And what did New Yorkers say? They said yes. They voted for it, not accidentally, not while distracted. 2.2 million people showed up. Then he began delivering. Everybody calls that competence. It isn't. A man who drives off a cliff at exactly the speed he announced is not a skilled driver. He's a punctual one. So I'll give him this. Nobody was defrauded. That's democracy. Now arithmetic gets a vote, and arithmetic is a miserable bastard. No lawn sign, no TikTok account for sure. Doesn't care about your pronouns, your MAGA hat, your union card, or the inspirational story about your grandmother. It just sits there adding everything up, the arithmetic. And New York isn't the real warning. The demand that produced New York is. Right now, there's more than 30 Democratic socialist candidates who have won Democratic primaries right now. And 62% of Americans under the age of 30 view socialism favorably. Before everybody over 50 starts screaming Karl Marx, stop. You know, most of these kids didn't get here by reading Karl Marx, Lenin, or anything else. What they did is they read a hospital bill. They tried to buy a house. They tried to pay for a normal college in America. Their experience with capitalism is an app charging $19.87 to move a $7 burrito 4 blocks on DoorDash, plus a service fee, a small order fee, and a "we noticed you looked hungry" fee. So a man on an electric bike rides through the rain, carrying food from a building to another building you can see from the first building. And somehow Goldman Sachs got involved. I'm not kidding. That is what these kids see. So if you think about it, the grievance is real. You know, you got to admit that. That's what makes this a very politically powerful story. Housing right now is brutal. And with interest rates going up, healthcare is totally incomprehensible. College can arrive with the financial characteristics now of a starter mortgage minus the house. So the diagnosis, if you look at it, contains a lot of the truth. But a correct diagnosis, unfortunately, does not come bundled with a working prescription. So what are we dealing with here? The subtraction. So let's give the program every fair assumption that we can. Socialism. Medicare for all doesn't create every healthcare dollar from nothing. Some private premiums become public spending. Fine. That I will concede. But let's think about this a lot more deeply. So now ask the question politicians hate. Why? Because it requires nouns. What is the question? Who pays? So if you go to the Cato estimate, 9 major proposals at somewhere between 71 trillion and 212 trillion over 10 years. That is not a CBO score. It's an advocacy think tank's model. The range is enormous because the assumptions that these socialists are making are also enormous. Fine again. Let's take the low number, $71 trillion over 10 years to fund all these free benefits. Now, if you took every billionaire in America, and I mean all of them, take their real estate, take their fancy cars, take their stock, take their houses, their yachts, and of course, you got to take their fancy airplanes as well. The tasteful ranch in Wyoming, where they go reconnect with the land through a staff of 14 or 15. What is the total wealth of every billionaire in America? Well, it's about 8.4 trillion against 71. So this doesn't prove billionaires can't pay more taxes. They can. What it does, it proves something much more narrower. The billionaires will pay for it, is what the socialists say, is not a financing plan for promises measured in tens of trillions of dollars. Eventually, the definition of rich has to expand a lot more. And eventually, it starts driving towards your zip code. Why? Because billionaires are not a renewable resource. You can't frack them, guys. You can't. So now Republicans can stop applauding because Democrats don't own the patent on pretending that somebody else will pay. Republicans just use better branding. So what does the left say? The socialists? Free. What does the right say? Borrowed. So the net interest on the federal debt ran about $963 billion from October through July. That's more than $3 billion every day for money we've already spent. Debt is crossing $40 trillion, and $5 trillion of additional borrowing authority was approved in July 2025 by a president and a Congress elected to restrain exactly this behavior. More than half was used in about 13 months. Not a dollar of that required a socialist. It only required a signature. The party running as the fire extinguisher has been carrying the gas can. So this is why partisan fiscal debates make me laugh. Democrats say the billionaire will pay. Republicans say growth and productivity will pay. The Treasury says wonderful. We'll auction the difference at 1 p.m. at higher interest rates. And Washington has an extraordinary ability to spend your money without ruining the surprise, which brings us to the only participant in the argument that doesn't care who won the election, the bond market. Politicians have voters, pollsters, they have consultants. Politicians have communication directors, people whose entire professional skill is saying investment when they mean spending. The Treasury has creditors. Creditors are less sentimental. Every business day, the bond market asks Washington one question: how much are you going to pay me to believe you for 30 years? And here's what caught my attention. In the first half of August, we got economic reports that should have helped long-term bonds. Softer data, we got cooler inflation, the sort of thing that normally makes the 30-year Treasury very happy. The long bond basically looked at it and said, that's adorable. When a market refuses to celebrate the good news, maybe the good news isn't the news it's pricing. That's the tell here, because Congress can propose arithmetic all day long, but the bond market charges interest on the postponement. So, what did I do? I can't fix Congress. I certainly can't fix New York City. I can't make 40 trillion disappear. And yelling at the television has, produced disappointing returns so far. But I can decide what I own, and this is where the politics becomes an investment decision. The risk I'm positioning for isn't socialism, it's promises. Promises about spending, promises about taxes, and promises about debt. Promises that somebody else will eventually pay, but not us. And I want more scarcity, more physical assets, more cash flow that doesn't require Washington to keep every promise it's made. And businesses where somebody else has to buy the trucks, hire the employees, buy the diesel, and stand in line for the permit, which brings me to what I bought. Franco, Nevada, FNF. Keep that. Write it down. Franco, Nevada doesn't operate the mine. It owns royalties and streams. Somebody else buys the truck. Somebody else hires the miner. Somebody else buys the diesel. Somebody else digs the hole. Franco gets a contractual piece of what comes out. That's not a mining company. It's a landlord who never has to fix the boiler. And energy is part of why I like it. When diesel rises, the mine operator gets punched in the mouth. Franco also owns oil and gas royalties. So the same barrel that mugs the tenant can pay the landlord. Now the number that got my attention. Its margin per gold equivalent ounce went from $1,500 in 2022 to $4,300 in 2026, up roughly 180%, while gold itself rose about 160%. So the royalty economics improved faster than the metal. And this isn't theoretical for me. I bought it. My first third near $230, my second below $200, and my final third last week around $225. Why buy again after seeing it below $200? Because below $200, I was buying an argument. At the higher price, I'm buying the filing. Everybody noticed what was going on. But there's no magic bunker. Franco has exposure to Panama, where I grew up. I lived there for 20 years and know a lot about it. And Panama is deciding the future of one of the largest copper mines on earth. Franco doesn't own the mine, it owns a contract. Now that's the weak point. A government doesn't have to seize the trucks. It doesn't have to shut the gate. It doesn't even have to send soldiers, the military, police. That's old-fashioned, very inefficient. You have lawyers now. So Panama has a contract. It could change the percentage, change the delivery terms, change the contract. The mill keeps turning. The rock keeps moving in the mine for gold and copper and silver. And my share gets smaller. The same thing that keeps the sheriff away lets the clerk in. I bought it knowing that because I don't think that's going to happen. Because investing isn't about finding something with no risk. It's deciding which risk you're willing to own. So let's go back to the beginning. Mamdani says somebody else will pay. Everything is free. Congress says the future will pay. The Treasury Department says the bond market will finance it, and everybody has a plan for somebody else's money. It's one of America's great renewable resources. And I don't know which political promise finally breaks the arithmetic. I don't know what election does it. I don't even know what day the bond market decides it's heard enough. But I don't intend to wait for that day with all my money dependent on some promise. That's why I own gold. That's why I own silver. That's why I own Bitcoin. And that's why I just finished building my position in Franco, Nevada. Not because it's invulnerable. I just told you exactly where it can get hurt in Panama. But because when politicians tell me somebody else will pay, I want to know, where does the invoice go? Because sooner or later, the bond market introduces you to somebody else. And you know who that is? It's you.